Hey, I'm Pete with Mosko Moto, and in today's video, I'm going to talk about some tips for how to set up and rig your Reckless 80 bag system. My buddy Trav is with me on this trip. He's the one holding the camera, and he's going to help out. So my first tip about setting up your new Reckless 80 is to match the gear you bring on the trip with the type of bike you're riding and the type of terrain you plan to be riding in. If you're on a small bike in challenging terrain, bring less stuff. Everything should fit in one of the 3 supplied dry bags. Don't add additional bags or stuff all kinds of weird things under the beaver tail. If you can't get everything you need in the 3 supplied dry bags that come with the Reckless 80 kit, consider stepping up to a rack-mounted pannier system like our Backcountry 35s, or maybe downsizing your kit. This bag is going to fit the same amount of stuff whether you pack it on a BMW 1250 GS or a little KTM 500, but obviously the load carrying capacity of those 2 bikes is very different. Next tip, even though we call this a rackless bag, you're still going to need solid tie-down points to connect it to. On smaller dual sports, you're going to want some kind of a soft luggage side rack too, like these True North racks that Trav's using on his Husky 501. On these small bikes, there's no subframe to support the bag, and also there's nothing to prevent the leg of the bag from swinging into the wheel well and rubbing against your tire. So please, on the smaller bikes, use side racks. If you don't like the sound of that, consider downsizing your camping kit, or maybe switching to our Reckless 40, which mounts really cleanly on these smaller bikes. Next tip, if you're trying to decide what angle position to set the harness at, for any bike that's designed to be ridden in a stand-up riding position, like for off-road riding, you're pretty much going to choose option 3. Options 1 and 2 work for some of the more traditional touring bikes, and then for smaller dual sports like the 500 501, you can actually drill or melt custom holes. That way you can customize the angle and the fit and the width exactly how you like it. Next tip, should you get Aux Pockets for your Reckless 80? My take is if you're on a bigger bike, traveling longer distances, by all means get them. They're super handy. It's a great spot to stash things while you're traveling. If you're on a smaller bike like the 890, the 500 501, I'd say skip them. They're going to weigh down the back of the leg. It's going to cause movement when you're riding off-road, and they also create a risk of the bag swinging into the wheel well and contacting the tire. Consider downsizing your kit a bit, or maybe getting a small tank bag like the Gnome, the Gnome Max, or Gnome Mini, or a backpack like our Wildcat, and skip the Aux Pockets. Next tip, rig the Reckless 80 as far forward on the bike as you possibly can. Think of it more like a passenger and less like a duffel that sits on the rear luggage plate. You want to rig the bag so that the distance between the bottom of the leg and the connection point on the bike is as short as possible. The longer that is, the more the bag can move around while you're riding. Next tip, pay attention to exhaust heat and always use a heat shield. No part of the bag or your bike's plastic should ever come in contact with the exhaust. If they do, they're going to melt. Aftermarket pipes run a lot cooler than the stock OEM pipes. On certain bikes like the 690 and the 701 that run super hot, you're definitely going to want an aftermarket exhaust. Also, be very aware of the hot air coming out the end of the pipe. That's going to burn or melt anything it touches. This is especially true on bikes with very short exhaust pipes like Scramblers or the KTM 390. Next tip, for the rear connection, if you're trying to decide between the 3 webbing straps that come with the bag or the optional knoblin mount, the knoblin's going to work better than the straps in pretty much every application, unless you're on a borrowed or rented bike, you're just hard up for cash, or if you're going to rig the bag so far forward on the bike that there's nowhere to actually mount the knoblin. Okay, final tip, tighten all your straps. These straps on the side of the leg harness, they do not go like this. Instead, they go up to the dry bag, and they help keep the dry bag tight in the harness. This strap on the center of the harness goes through the handle on your Stinger 22 dry bag. That way there's literally no way for that dry bag to escape from the harness when you're riding in rough terrain. Make sure you really tighten this strap every time you ride. Make sure the leg straps are always super tight. Maybe grab the bag, shake it around, and make sure everything is super snug. Okay, those are my Reckless 80 rigging tips. I hope that helps you get your bag all set up. I really recommend going out for a test ride with all your stuff on the bike just to make sure everything's set up before you head out for a long trip. I've logged countless miles and countless days with this bag over the years since our very first prototype of it on all different kinds of bikes in many different countries around the world, never had any major issues. If you have any questions I didn't cover here, hit us with a comment below or send us a note, moskomoto@moskomoto.com. We'll get right back to you. Thanks so much for watching.